What is going on? What's going on? Happy Monday to you. So, this is your homework support for EL7.2. Today, we're thinking about how do we analyze the protagonist, thinking about dynamic versus round character types. All right. So, today we pretty much talked about not only dynamic and round, but we also talked about the fact that our main character, our protagonist, they're normally activists. They're activists to some degree. They are fighting for something by the end of the text. And so your job today is to pretty much prove that. You're writing in Logos, so you are proving that Jonas and the Giver is in fact the protagonist based on either him being dynamic around as well as you understanding what he's fighting for, or at least having some idea about what he's fighting for. We did some of that work today. You have a few things with you. One, you have your checklist. So as you are completing every section of your analysis book, you want to look over this to make sure that you have all parts actually written in. And then you have your book itself. And I gave you one, but you can also just write on a separate sheet and just do one regular analysis paper if that's what you prefer to do. Or you can type it up on Google Classroom as well. All right? So first thing you want to do is, I'm going to start with the intro. You want to make sure you have everything. So I have, these are your stems on this side. These are what you need to have in every single section. All right. So I know I need my book title and my author, and I may start with an author's book, in this case, and Lois Lowry's The Giver. So I know I can cross it off because I have it. Next, I got to make sure I name who is my protagonist. This may start with, I would argue that the protagonist is. In this case, I would argue that the Jonas is the protagonist. So I have it mentioned, I can cross that off. Next, I need to make sure that I have how the protagonist fits the definition. And at this point, we're thinking about the activist definition. How do they fit the idea of having a goal, pursuing a goal by being an activist? And that may start with due to being an activist for. So in Lois Lowry's The Giver, I would argue that Jonas is the protagonist of the story. This can be supported based on multiple pieces of evidence in the book that show Jonas being an activist for. At this point, we came up with a few things. Some people said that he's an activist for his community and trying to get them color. Some people say he's an activist for his community and trying to make sure that they have the ability to make decisions. So whatever you want to go right there. So Jones being an activist for his, make sure I got this right, so for his community. For his community's right to see color. So now I can mark that off. I have what I feel like he's an activist for. After that, I need to make sure that I have my type. So it says how the protagonist fits the character type and definition. That sentence may start with, and that he is a character type, character due to definition. We know dynamic or round. And that he is a, at this point, you want to put dynamic or round character. So I'm just put dynamic or round. You're not going to write dynamic or round. You're choosing which one you're rolling with, due to. And at this point, we want to make sure that we be very clear. I do, but we want to be very clear with our character type. And so if you're saying dynamic, then you need to make sure that you say due to Jonas showing a trait of ... in the beginning of the book, comma, but starting to change and become more ... So for your dynamic character, you may want to do something like this. All right. So when you're doing that and you're doing the due to using your definition, pull the trace out. Actually pull the trace out. So in the beginning of the story, Jonas was this trait. However, I'm starting to see him change to this trait. So when you're doing dynamic, if that's what you're doing, make sure you know and name that. If you're doing round, then instead, what you want to do is think about who Jonas is. So Jonas is primarily and I'm writing as I'm doing this. Let me come up a little bit. So Jonas is primarily a blank person, and that's where the trait goes in. This will be your trait, okay, a blank person, comma, but when it comes to what's the human connection from your notes, that's a little sloppy, that says human connection. I know it's a little sloppy, human connection. But when it comes to ... or the human connection, he shows himself to be, and this is the change of trait there. All right, so if you do round character, that's what you're doing. What is his primary trait? What does he seem to always show throughout the story? But when it comes to him actually noticing something that's right or wrong, or having that connection as just a human being, how do you see him change? How did that trait change? All right? And so these are a couple, that's how you do your intro. And then your intro is done, you mark that off. Where my proof will come from, which can start, this can be supported using, so what will you support? We are going to have the exact same thing. This can be supported based on multiple pieces of evidence in the book. So we're all going to have the exact same thing, which is why it's on here. So that's your intro. All right? Now, I'm going to jump to body 2, because that's the most complex one. Body 1 is very straightforward. Follow the stems. But when you get to body 2, as you notice, there's a little bit more going on down here. Normally, we have 2 pieces of evidence, one in body 1, one in body 2, but your body 2 needs 2 pieces of evidence because you are, 1, proving the character type. So you're proving that Jonas is dynamic or that he is round. However, because of that, you need to have 2 pieces of evidence to show the change. If you say dynamic, you have to show what was he like in the beginning, and then what was he like later? Or how is he changing now that we're later in the book? So focus on chapters 1 through 9 for the beginning. Focus on chapters 10 through 14 for the later trait. Okay? If you're saying round, then you need to think about, well, in the early part of the text, what does he seem to show you? So in chapters 1 through 9, what trait does Jonas seem to show most often? And then, now that we're at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, what are you noticing about how he's changing? What trait comes through based on what he's learning, based on those situations where he's able to have that human connection or notice that something is right and something is wrong, or something's wrong. All right? A few things that you can use. Remember, there's level-headed if you need to think about that. Think about the word compassionate. Think about that as well. Just kind of throw a few out there in case, if you think that you can actually support those. And I'll let you decide how you want to use it. But similar, you'll do the same thing. So for 1, I need to make sure I begin with what happened to prove the protagonist fits the character type in my own words. So here I will have my furthermore, Jonas is the protagonist because most main characters are, and then whatever you put here in your intro, you're going to put here. So if you said dynamic, you'll write dynamic. If you said round, you'll write round. So most main characters are whatever character types. And Jonas's traits, what's the trait which fit the definition of this character type? And you kind of just go through. So just follow the same format and cross off the way that is, all right? So hopefully this is clear for you. The book's pretty much set up for you. You have all the stems. It's going to take a lot of just you thinking with the text, thinking with the checklist, taking your time and really making sure that you use what you know how to write. So just make sure things make sense and that there should be a flow with the evidence. And that's pretty much it. Good luck.